And now, we return to the Velvet Veil. Lust Never Lost presents The Velvet Veil, Episode 2, The Man Who Remembered Her Name. There are certain doors in the world that do not open because you knock. They open because something inside you has already surrendered. I learned that on the second night I found the Velvet Veil. The first time I told myself it had been an accident, a wrong turn in the rain, a nameless lounge hidden between dead storefronts on a forgotten street, with velvet curtains behind smoked glass and a gold handle shaped like a woman's hand. Music slipped through the cracks like perfume through lace. I told myself many things after that night. I told myself I had imagined the red hallway. I told myself I exaggerated the chandeliers. I told myself no woman could look at a man for 3 quiet seconds and leave him feeling as if every lie he had ever told himself had been gently undressed. I told myself Seraphine Vale was simply beautiful, and that was the safest lie. Beauty is easy to understand. Men have ruined themselves for beauty since the first fire was lit, but Seraphine was not merely beautiful. She was attentive, and attention is far more dangerous. By the second night, I had stopped pretending I wasn't searching for the street again. Rain covered the city in black glass, while streetlights stretched across the pavement in trembling gold ribbons. Taxis hissed past through drifting fog, while somewhere in the distance, a siren rose and fell like an animal remembering its wound. I walked without admitting to myself that I knew exactly where I was going. That is the mercy temptation offers. It allows you to preserve the dignity of confusion. You can say you wandered. You can say the night pulled you somewhere strange. But the body knows better because the body remembers the room where it was seen. By the time I reached the alley off St. Aurelia Street, my pulse had already changed. At the end of the alley, the door waited, black wood with no sign, only the gold handle shaped like a woman's hand and a black rose suspended inside a thin gold circle above it. I stood there longer than I should have because a happy man would never have come back. I placed my hand over the golden one. The metal was warm and the door opened inward before I touched the handle. Inside, the music was waiting. Not loud. Never loud. The Velvet Veil did not need volume. A piano drifted somewhere deeper inside the building, each note falling into the next with the exhausted grace of a woman removing jewelry after midnight. The entrance hall seemed longer than before, filled with dark velvet walls, gold candlelight, and mirrors old enough to distort truth. I watched my reflection pass from glass to glass and thought I looked like a man trying not to look afraid. At the end of the hallway stood the caretaker, tall and thin in black clothing with silver at the temples, the kind of face the mind struggled to remember clearly. A folded white cloth rested over one arm, while brass keys hung silently from the other. He inclined his head slightly and quietly said that I had returned. I told him I thought I had. For a moment, he studied me with unsettling calm, not my face, but something deeper. He said most people returned. I asked what happened to the rest. The caretaker glanced toward one of the mirrors and softly replied that they found better lies. The piano shifted somewhere deeper inside the veil, something wounded and intimate moving through the melody. I wanted to ask him what this place truly was, how it could exist in a city I thought I knew, and why after only one night there, the rest of the world had begun feeling strangely artificial. But questions sounded smaller inside the Velvet Veil, like coins dropped into deep water. The caretaker turned and I followed. We passed doors half open to fragments of impossible rooms, including a dining hall where untouched wine glasses trembled slightly on the table, a library with no visible lamps, and a mirrored chamber where every reflection showed the room empty. Then from behind one closed door, I heard a man crying quietly, not loudly, but with the controlled sound of someone trying desperately not to be heard. I slowed while the caretaker continued walking. I asked who was behind the door. He replied that it was no one tonight. I told him that did not answer the question. He calmly said it was not meant to. The hallway finally opened into the main room. The velvet veil unfolded before me like a dream with expensive taste, filled with red curtains, shadowed balconies, candles flickering against polished black tables, and smoke gathered near the ceiling like low weather. People sat in pairs or alone. Some whispered. Some stared into their drinks. Some watched the stage. At the piano sat a woman in black satin beneath dim gold chandeliers, her dark hair falling over one shoulder while her hands moved across the keys with unbearable tenderness. I did not know her name yet, but I already understood the sadness. And her music. Above the room, standing at the balcony railing, was the man who immediately unsettled me. He wore a black suit with an open collar and carried himself with the calm composure wealthy predators often possess. He looked down at the room as if disappointment bored him. For one brief moment, his eyes met mine. There was no welcome and no hostility, only recognition, as if he already understood exactly what kind of man walks willingly into a place like this twice. Then he looked away. The caretaker stopped beside me and informed me that my table was prepared. I told him I had not reserved one. He quietly replied that I had not. He led me toward a small candlelit table near the edge of the room where a dark red drink already waited beside a folded card. My name was written on the outside in ink the color of dried roses. I stared at it without touching it and asked if she would be there. The question came out too quickly. The caretaker's expression never changed as he calmly replied that she was already aware I was there. Then he disappeared back into the shadows. I sat slowly while the chair beneath me still felt warm, as if someone had occupied it moments earlier. Across the room, the piano softened to something almost unbearably intimate. I opened the card and found 7 words inside. You remembered the way. That is enough. No signature was necessary because I already knew it came from Lucien Vale. My throat tightened because it embarrassed me how little it took. A sentence, a table, and the suggestion that she had remembered me. I lifted the glass. The drink was bitter first, then warm, then strangely comforting. And when I opened my eyes again, Lucien Vale was sitting across from me. There had been no footsteps and no dramatic arrival, only presence. Black velvet, lace gloves, dark hair pinned loosely above candlelit eyes. She looked less like a woman entering a room and more like the room had slowly become her. She quietly told me that I had come back. Her voice was lower than memory had made it. I admitted that I had tried not to return. A faint smile touched her lips before she softly replied that no, I really hadn't. Adrian Blackthorne moved through the velvet veil with the quiet gravity of a man carrying something broken inside his chest. Not fresh grief, but something older than that, something refined by time until it became part of him. As he crossed the room, conversation soft around him, not out of fear, but recognition. People here knew him, or worse, understood him. Serafini watched him approach with unreadable calm, no panic, no excitement, only the weary composure of someone reopening. A story they already knew would end badly. I quietly asked if she knew him well, and she replied that she knew what survived of him. The answer settled heavily between us. Adrian stopped briefly beside the piano. For the first time all evening, Evelyn Marrow looked up while playing. Their eyes met for only a second, but something old and exhausted passed silently between them before she lowered her gaze back to the keys. The melody softened after that, slower now and more intimate. Adrian finally reached the bar beneath the balcony. Shadows and Lucien Vale appeared beside him, so suddenly it felt less like movement and more like manifestation. One moment, Adrian stood alone, and the next, Lucien occupied the darkness beside him with effortless composure. Neither man greeted the other. Lucien poured 2 glasses of dark liquor while Adrian ignored the first and accepted the second. Their conversation remained too distant to hear clearly, but I watched Adrian's posture shift as Lucien spoke. Tension tightened his shoulders, then eased, then tightened again, as if Lucien understood exactly where to place the knife. I asked Seraphine who Lucien really was to this place, and her eyes lingered toward the balcony as she quietly said that Lucien remembered people honestly. I admitted I still did not know what that meant, and she softly replied that eventually I would. Again, that answer. Again, that maddening certainty. Outside, thunder rolled softly above the city while the lights inside the Velvet Vale dimmed slightly. The room seemed to draw inward around itself. Candles glowed warmer, shadows deepened. The entire lounge suddenly felt more intimate and somehow more dangerous. Adrian emptied his glass in one slow swallow. Lucien leaned toward him and whispered something near his ear. I saw Adrian's jaw tighten instantly. Then, without warning, Adrian turned toward our table, toward Seraphine. The room changed after that, not visibly but emotionally. Even the people pretending not to watch suddenly became very interested in their drinks. Adrian started toward you slowly, and for the first time since entering the Velvet Vale, I felt something colder than desire moving through the room. Seraphine remained perfectly composed, though her fingers tightened slightly around the stem of her glass. It was a tiny movement, easy to miss unless you were already looking for fractures in her elegance. I quietly asked if I should know what was happening, and she calmly replied no. I told her that did not sound reassuring. A faint smile touched her lips as she softly admitted it was not meant to. Adrian stopped beside our table. Up close, he looked even more exhausted than before, not physically but emotionally, like sleep had abandoned him years ago and never returned. Rain still clung to the shoulders of his charcoal coat. His eyes settled on Seraphine first, not with anger and not with affection, but with something far worse, longing that had survived past dignity. He quietly told her that she should never have allowed him to come back. Seraphine met his gaze without flinching and reminded him that she had never invited him. Adrian replied that was exactly what worried him. For several seconds, neither of them spoke. The silence between them felt practiced, like two people who had repeated this emotional dance too many times before. Then Adrian finally looked at me. He quietly observed that I was new there. I nodded carefully. He studied me for a moment, and I realized he was not judging me. He pitied me. That unsettled me more than hostility would have. Adrian gave a faint, humorless smile before quietly warning me to leave before this place taught me the difference between being desired and being understood. The words landed harder than they should have because some part of me already understood exactly what he meant. Seraphine's expression softened almost imperceptibly as she told him he was frightening me. Adrian laughed once, a damaged sound. He kept his eyes fixed on mine as he quietly admitted that he was not trying to frighten me, he was trying to warn me. Then Adrian slowly reached into the inside pocket of his coat. The room tensed. Even Evelyn's piano faltered for half a heartbeat. But Adrian only removed a photograph, old and worn soft at the edges from handling. He placed it carefully on the table between us. I looked down. A younger Adrian Blackthorne stood smiling beside a dark-haired woman I had never seen before. She was beautiful, elegant, alive in the way happy people sometimes are before tragedy finds them. And standing slightly behind them both was Lucien Vale, exactly the same as she looked now. I could not stop staring at the photograph. The edges were worn soft from years of handling, but the faces remained painfully clear. Adrian looked younger there, lighter somehow, like life had not yet discovered where to place its teeth. Her smile carrying the relaxed warmth of someone who still believed happiness could survive the future. and behind them stood Seraphine Vale, unchanged in every impossible detail. The same eyes, the same calm, the same unsettling beauty untouched by time. I quietly admitted that the photograph made no sense. Adrian's gaze lowered toward the image, as if looking at it physically hurt him. He softly replied that it had stopped making sense a very long time ago. I asked who the woman was. Adrian answered almost immediately, as if the name had lived inside his throat for years, waiting to be spoken. Vivienne. Even the way he said it sounded intimate enough to wound him. I asked what had happened to her. For several seconds, Adrian said nothing at all. The piano continued softly somewhere behind us, while rain whispered faintly against the windows of the Velvet Vale. Finally, Adrian admitted that he still did not know. Before I could ask another question, Lucien appeared beside the table with the same impossible silence he carried everywhere inside the lounge. He rested one hand lightly against the back of Adrian's chair and looked down at the photograph. With detached calm, Lucien quietly observed that memory becomes dangerous when preserved too carefully. Adrian's jaw tightened instantly. He warned Lucien not to start. Lucien replied that Adrian had been the one who brought the photograph. The tension between them felt older than hatred, more intimate than anger. Seraphine remained silent through all of it, though her expression had grown distant, almost guilty. I looked toward her and asked if she had known Vivienne too. Seraphine's eyes lowered briefly toward the photograph before she softly admitted that everyone inside the Velvet Vale had known Vivienne once. I asked what that meant. Lucien answered before she could. He calmly explained that people like Vivienne leave traces behind them, especially in places built from longing. Adrian suddenly stood from the table so hard the chair scraped sharply against the floor. Several nearby conversations immediately died. Adrian stared directly at Lucien and quietly warned him not to speak about her like that. Lucien never raised his voice. He simply replied that the truth does not become kinder when whispered. Adrian looked as though he wanted to strike him. Instead, he reached for the whiskey glass and emptied it in one swallow. I realized then that nobody inside the Velvet Vale feared violence nearly as much as they feared honesty. Evelyn's piano drifted slower now, softer, each note hanging briefly in the air before dissolving into smoke and candlelight. Adrian remained standing beside the table, one hand pressed against the edge as if steadying himself against some invisible pressure building inside him. Finally, he looked toward me again and quietly asked if I wanted to know the worst thing about the Velvet Vale. I admitted that part of me did. Adrian gave a faint, exhausted smile and told me the worst thing was that the Velvet Vale never lies to anyone. He explained that people spend their entire lives hiding from themselves, distracting themselves, pretending they love the wrong people for the right reasons. But inside this place, eventually, all of that disappears. I asked what remained after that. Adrian looked toward Seraphine as though the answer physically lived inside her. Then he quietly replied that whatever remains is usually what destroys you. Seraphine finally spoke again, softly warning Adrian that he did not have to keep doing this to himself. Adrian laughed once under his breath and admitted that he no longer knew how to stop. For the first time all evening, I saw genuine sadness move across Seraphine's face, not manipulation, not mystery. Regret. Lucien watched all of it with unreadable calm. Then, almost casually, he asked Adrian whether he had heard Vivienne again. The room seemed to freeze. Adrian's expression changed instantly. Not anger this time, fear, real fear. I felt it move through the table like cold water. Seraphine sharply told Lucien that was enough, but Lucien ignored her completely. His eyes never left Adrian as he quietly asked whether he still heard her. Laughing in the hallway at night. Adrian's breathing had changed now, shallow and uneven. He stared toward the dark corridor near the back of the lounge, as though part of him expected someone to emerge from it. I asked what Lucien meant. Adrian answered before anyone else could. In a voice barely above a whisper, he admitted that, sometimes late at night, somewhere deep inside the Velvet Veil, he still heard Vivienne laughing like she had never left at all. Silence settled over the table after that. Even the piano seemed quieter. Then, from somewhere beyond the velvet hallway behind us, a woman laughed softly in the distance. Adrian went completely still. And for the first time since entering the Velvet Veil, I saw genuine fear in his eyes. Adrian stood motionless after the laughter faded. Nobody inside the Velvet Veil spoke. Even Lucien seemed willing to let the silence linger for a moment longer. Rain crawled softly across the tall black windows while candlelight flickered against the walls like failing memories. I could feel tension spreading through the lounge in subtle ways, shoulders stiffening, conversations dying before they fully formed, glasses lingering halfway to lips. Whatever had just happened, everyone in this room understood it better than I did. Adrian slowly turned toward the hallway. The expression on his face no longer looked like grief alone. It looked like temptation, dangerous temptation, the kind that survives even after pain teaches you better. Seraphine quietly told him not to go. Adrian kept staring into the darkness beyond the velvet curtains as if part of him no longer heard her. He softly admitted that the laugh sounded exactly like Vivienne. Lucien remained calm beside the table and observed that memory often sounds most convincing when someone wants forgiveness. Adrian's eyes snapped toward him with sudden anger and warned Lucien not to do this tonight. Lucien asked what exactly Adrian believed was happening. Then he calmly wondered whether Adrian truly thought the Velvet Veil had hidden Vivienne somewhere. All these years waiting patiently for his suffering to become romantic enough. The cruelty of the question settled hard against the table. Seraphine sharply told Lucien to stop, but Lucien only looked toward me and quietly explained that people rarely come to the Velvet Veil searching for pleasure. They come searching for permission to obsess, permission to surrender, permission to become the worst version of their longing. I asked if that was what happened to Adrian. Lucien replied that Adrian had arrived years ago, believing love could save him. Then he softly added that now Adrian returned because suffering was the only thing left connecting him to Vivienne. Adrian suddenly moved toward Lucien so quickly several nearby patrons stood from their seats. For one dangerous second, I thought he might actually strike him. Instead, Adrian stopped inches away and quietly admitted that Lucien talked about people as though they were insects pinned beneath glass. Lucien gave the faintest smile and replied that honesty often sounds cruel to people still bargaining with fantasy. The room had become unbearably tense now. Even the piano had stopped completely. Then Seraphine stood. The movement itself changed the atmosphere. Everyone noticed. She stepped between Adrian and Lucien with calm elegance, though exhaustion lingered behind her eyes now in ways I have not seen before. She quietly told Adrian that he needed to leave for tonight. Adrian stared at her for several long seconds. When he finally spoke, his voice sounded smaller than before as he asked whether she truly wanted him to leave. Seraphine hesitated. That frightened me more than anything else. Finally, she softly admitted that she wanted him to survive. Something inside Adrian visibly collapsed after hearing that. He lowered his eyes, nodded once, then reached for the photograph still resting on the table. His fingers lingered against it briefly before sliding it back into his coat. Without another word, he turned and walked toward the velvet hallway. Nobody stopped him. Nobody watched openly. But everyone felt him leaving. I followed him with my eyes until his silhouette disappeared fully into shadow. For several moments afterward, nobody at our table spoke. Then Lucien calmly adjusted the sleeve of his jacket and quietly observed that Adrian would eventually return again. I asked how he could possibly know that. Lucien looked directly at me for the first time all evening. His expression remained perfectly composed, but something about his eyes suddenly felt ancient. He softly explained that the Velvet Veil does not hold people against their will. It simply becomes the only place where they stop lying to themselves. The answer unsettled me more than I wanted to admit. Across the lounge, Evelyn slowly returned. To the piano. The first notes arrived softly, hesitant at first, then warmer, sadder, more intimate than before. Seraphine sat beside me again, though her attention remained fixed somewhere distant. I quietly asked her if Lucien was right. She did not answer immediately. Finally, she admitted that sometimes people confuse being understood with being saved. I looked toward the hallway Adrian had disappeared into and asked whether anyone ever truly escaped this place. Seraphine's eyes lowered toward the candle between us while the flame reflected softly across her face and smoke drifted through the dim gold light. Then she quietly told me that some people never leave the Velvet Veil, even after they are gone. The piano continued softly beneath the sound of rain. Somewhere deeper inside the building, hidden far beyond the velvet curtains and candlelit rooms, I thought I heard a woman laughing again. This time, nobody reacted. And somehow that frightened me even more. The Velvet Veil awaits. This has been a Studio 3.14 transmission.